The narcissist's psychological world implodes when confronted with absolute silence from someone they once controlled. This void of response triggers a predictable yet devastating cycle that exposes the full spectrum of their emotional instability and desperate need for attention. Complete silence denies them the one thing they crave more than love or admiration: acknowledgement of their existence. What follows is a harrowing journey through disbelief, panic, rage, and eventual acceptance that reveals the narcissist's complete dependence on external validation for their sense of reality. The shock of sudden irrelevance. The narcissist's initial response to complete silence is profound disbelief mixed with cognitive dissonance. They genuinely cannot comprehend that someone would choose to remove them from their life entirely, as this contradicts their fundamental worldview where they occupy the center of everyone's emotional universe. They replay their last interactions, searching for clues, convinced there must be some mistake or misunderstanding that explains this inexplicable silence. This shock phase triggers obsessive attempts to restore contact through increasingly creative means. They test different communication channels, trying various emotional angles to provoke any response: concern, anger, curiosity, or even hatred. Any reaction would confirm their continued existence in their victim's mind, but complete silence creates a psychological vacuum that terrifies them at a primal level. The narcissist experiences this silence as a form of psychological death, where they cease to exist in someone's awareness entirely. This triggers existential panic because their sense of self depends heavily on being perceived, discussed, and thought about by others. The absence of any feedback creates a disorienting void where their carefully constructed identity begins to feel increasingly unreal. The rage of the ignored. When initial attempts to break the silence fail, the narcissist's confusion transforms into volcanic fury. This rage stems from the ultimate narcissistic injury, being deemed so inconsequential that they don't even warrant a response. They oscillate between self-righteous indignation and wounded pride, constructing elaborate narratives about their victim's immaturity, cowardice, or cruelty in refusing to engage. This anger phase manifests in increasingly aggressive attempts to force a reaction. They may send barrages of messages that swing wildly between apologetic and accusatory, create situations designed to force unavoidable contact, or engage in behavior specifically calculated to provoke their victim into breaking silence. Their rage reveals the depth of their psychological fragility. They would rather be hated than ignored, as hatred at least confirms their impact on another person's emotional state. The narcissist's fury also masks their growing terror that they've genuinely lost their grip on someone they considered psychologically conquered. The silence represents a boundary so absolute that none of their usual manipulation tactics can penetrate it, forcing them to confront their own powerlessness in a way that feels psychologically unbearable. The grudging acceptance and strategic retreat. Eventually, the narcissist's sustained efforts against unyielding silence exhaust their emotional resources, forcing them into a phase of bitter acceptance. They cannot maintain their frenzy indefinitely, especially when it yields absolutely no results. This acceptance, however, is never graceful or reflective. It's a strategic retreat accompanied by a revised narrative that protects their ego from the devastating truth of their rejection. The narcissist begins constructing elaborate stories about why the silence doesn't actually matter. They convince themselves they were planning to end things anyway, that their victim was never truly important, or that the relationship was beneath them all along. This psychological revision allows them to maintain their grandiose self-image while processing the unthinkable reality that someone has successfully removed them from their life. During this phase, the narcissist typically redirects their attention toward new sources of validation, seeking fresh victims who can restore their sense of power and desirability. The silence has taught them nothing about their own behavior or its consequences, only that this particular source of supply has become permanently inaccessible. They file their victim away as someone who couldn't handle their magnificence, completing their delusional rewrite of history while the person who escaped enjoys the profound peace of their permanent absence.